Brooke Drum with Printrbot, Printrbot Live, and I wanted to show off the progress with the CNC. So this is the Printrbot CNC. We're doing an air print right now. I've got the acceleration a little bit needing to be tweaked a little bit. So some of these moves, I screwed up the settings. So if you hear it skip, it's because I screwed up. But I wanted you to see that it is, there it goes. I wanted you to see that it is moving, and it's pretty cool. So I'm running it off of, I don't know if you can see this, Dave. How's this glare? So if you can see this, this is the CNC JS that I'm running off of a Mac right now. I am setting it up. I finally got all of the instructions for the Raspberry Pi. I wonder if I can stop that. Yeah. I've got all the instructions for the Raspberry Pi set up so that I can run it without a USB cable attached. But I haven't finished setting up the Raspberry Pi, so we're running it off of this computer. We did run it yesterday off of a Windows laptop to verify that. I haven't tried the Linux yet, but I assume it works just like the Mac and the Windows. So part of the battle with CNC is the workflow that you use. Here's what I use, and I'm going to use. Right now, I do all my design in Fusion 360. You can do it in other programs. And then there's a post-processor, which takes the G-code and kind of changes it over to what the TinyG needs to move, so the G-code commands that it recognizes. And TinyG is pretty interesting. Now, we will sell boards that you could put Gerbil on. The printer boards, the older ones, do run Gerbil. But you can even run it off a Marlin. You can run it off a Smoothie board. What's the other one? That's pretty much it. That's the selections, at least, that are here in the program. Gerbil, Marlin, Smoothie, and TinyG. So I'm using TinyG. Kind of interesting, I'm using the TinyG G2 board that we have in our Simple Pro. So at first I was wondering if this would even work, but it does. It works great. And then you get access to all the nice motion that TinyG allows. So I wanted you to see this. So one thing that's cool about CNC.js is if you've used Mach 3 or seen the old school programs, you get these controls here. So it's a full program. You've got the G-code pathing here, and it's represented in kind of a 3D model. Let's see. We've got all of the controls for moving X, Y, and Z. And let's see here. Let me stop this program. So there it is moving. I'm moving X. I think it's only set up for small little movements right now. That's Y and Z. So you can set your work position. You can home the machine, control it manually, get it all set up that you want, how you want to before you start your cut. We have not got all of the accessories working yet, but right now I wanted to show you a couple that are kind of fun. One is we did set this up on another computer, but I have a different computer. It takes a little bit of time. This is the Shuttle Express, and it has a jog dial here. So the way that they ask you to set it up is this controls the spindle, this selects X, Y, Z, and this changes the feed rate speed, because you can switch between, move 1 millimeter or move, or if you're in inches, a 1/16 of an inch. And then you can use your jog dial to move the machine around. It's just kind of novel. It's not super necessary in a small machine like this, but it is nice to have it, especially when you've kind of got a pendant that can be over by your machine. And then you can set your home position. And these are all programmable, so I was going through, I didn't finish. But we did use this yesterday. Did we use this on? Oh, we used it on a Mac. So it verifies that that does work on a Mac. And then this one is kind of fun. I thought I'd show you this. These are really cheap off of Amazon. I don't remember exactly how much I paid, but this is a boroscope. So let's see. I'll show you. I've got the video feed running here, and I'll turn the screen. So you can see. Am I upside down? There it is. Yes, this is what it looks like. Where is it? Has a little light on it. You can adjust the light. That's my beard. So you can adjust the light, but the intention for this is to mount it somewhere on here, and you can point it to your work. So let's see if we can see what I'm getting at. So that's the router tip. Come on. There it is. So if I orient it right, you would be able to watch. Where is it? I'm really bad doing this backwards and upside down. But anyway, you can see the router bit there. So if you did have a little shroud to suck out the sawdust, you can still safely see what's going on and how it's cutting using this. So it's pretty neat. You can see it works. So anyway, so that's something that I intend to put on my machine just for fun. And that does work with the Raspberry Pi. So that's the borescope. And that was really easy. I just plugged it into my Mac and it worked here. Get all this out of here. Now the one that I haven't set up yet because it's really designed to work with Raspberry Pi is this PlayStation 3 controller. But I'm excited about using this. I did verify that it works. The Mac can use this as a game controller, so I just use the USB to plug it in. But normally this would run wireless off of Bluetooth. And the guys that are saying that they use it, it's really cool. You can just use the joysticks, and you can program all these buttons. In fact, they give you this cool page to show how it's set up. So the D-pad on here is going to be set up for, let's see, looks like there's several different settings here, but you can use the left trigger to change the speed, control X and Y, and then, let's see, where's Z? You have to toggle with the other button to use Z. But anyway, so these are all programmable, but really, really useful so you can move your machine around completely wirelessly. So it's like a pendant, which a pendant in a CNC is like a big wired thing that you'd have here, and you'd have a dial on it or something like that. So I know these aren't dedicated for CNC, but they're very cheap options and give it a lot of convenience. So I'm excited about setting up the Raspberry Pi to use this. This is probably what I'll use to control it. So I thought I'd show you that. And CNCJS, man, the more I dig into it, you know, I was with a guy yesterday, Jeremy Black, and he has one of our Printrbot CNCs, and he brought it by. He built a cart for it. He built a vacuum table for it, so that is definitely something that I'm going to do for these. We can provide instructions on how to build your own, which is pretty cheap. We might even sell them as upgrades. But it just uses MDF and a shop vac. But he said, you know, it's a great machine for projects. He is an officer. He used to be on the SWAT team. Now he's on the K-9 division. And he had these little badges that he was making for his dogs and other guys with in the K-9 outfit. They had little badges for their dogs, and he had brass. I water jetted some brass for him, and then he would put the police star on it and the name, the K-9 unit, the name of the dog, and I forget what do you remember his dog's name? He brought his dog by. It's some science fiction name. Maybe it's Condor. That's not really science fiction. Anyway, but he was making stuff out of metal with the PBCNC, and so he said, it's fine. It's with belts. It's kind of similar to this, but a different router. And you know, he said, I don't have any problem. But the thing that really makes you makes it a good match is when you know your software well, when you've got a vacuum table. He has a microscope that he used to find the home because on the PBCNC, the end stop switches weren't set up correctly on his. So anyway, we really want to provide some accessories to make it easy to use, so it's not like this big ordeal to go out and like figure out how I'm going to hold the work. A vacuum table works really, really well. He even has a vacuum pump that he holds the metal pieces down in a jig. So he brings his jig over and just sucks the vacuum down, and then he puts his vacuum pump on the smaller stuff, so that small little brass thing, he has this really powerful vacuum pump. So he has a shop vac and a vacuum pump, and he just places it on there. He doesn't have to screw it down. He doesn't have to hold it. Doesn't have to figure any of that out. It just wherever he places it, and then he can set up his program to make a whole bunch of things. So he does it. I wouldn't say it's production, but he makes many parts over and over and over. So he used to make cabinets for like high-end houses and stuff. So he's got tons of experience with CNC, and so he has all these great little tricks. So I'm going to utilize Jeremy when we start, when we finally get the machine for sale in all of its various configurations, and you guys figure it out how you want to set it up. Hopefully you'll get a vacuum table going, and we'll start doing projects. He has so many projects that he's done, and his cart that carries his CNC, he made on parts of it on the CNC. So it's kind of opening my eyes up to be able to do metal projects, share those projects with you, even just the G-code if you want to just plop down some wood and get going. So I just can't wait to have fun with it. Right now it's like all this stuff. Like I haven't even done the pricing yet, so if that's one of the questions that come out, I don't have an answer yet. But I'm going to unplug this, get this out of the way. So that is the CNC. I'm excited. The more I get into CNC.js, I was doing it yesterday with Jeremy, and he's used to Mach 3 and more like older tools. Now that he's a policeman, he hasn't done CNC in quite a while for a living. But I was showing him all of the keyboard shortcuts on CNC.js. All of these shortcuts are there with all of these accessories. He was lighting up like, oh man, that's going to be so nice, because that's a pain right now for me to go in and push the buttons on the software. So there's a big community. If you just check out, just do a Google for CNC.js, you can start to read about it and get a Pi, and I recommend you try it if you have a CNC. It's really good stuff. All right, so the configurations that I'm noodling around with right now, this is not exactly the size that I want to sell it at. Right now I think the cut area is, what is it? It's 17 by 17, I believe, right now. So there will be a smaller configuration like this, probably more like 24 by 18 will be the small one. So it'll be a little bit wider to get a few more inches out of it. I like that one guy that asked, you know, what size do you want? He says, I want to make a guitar. So I think that, is that big enough for a guitar, 18 inches wide? Surely guitars are like that. But anyway, so that would be, you know, to sell you a really small one just seems like why. You could order the panels and do any size you want, but people really like the turnkey kits. So we'll sell them in 3 sizes, and only 3 sizes, and then whatever size you want if you want to do it yourself and just get the panels and some of the parts. But I'm thinking somewhere around 24 by 18 for the small one, and then probably a middle-sized one that's fairly large, maybe 2 foot by 4 foot. So you'd have a cut section that's, let's see, that's 4 foot by 2 foot. So it would take up most of this table and be 4 foot wide, so it's really a bench unto itself. And then I want to do a crawlbot size that's really big. And so I've ordered the materials to show you the 3 sizes. And then we're probably going to configure these differently on each machine. And I had one question that came in over, I think it was Twitter or a comment on Google+, because I posted about the CNC on Google+. Oh, by the way, Dave, let's run this video. Should I just leave it here? I can talk while you watch this run. This was the, there's an audio that needs to hear, but if you want to just position over here. So this is the part that we ran today. In fact, Mark ran one before I got in, and we had the thickness of the material wrong, so we had to cut out the bottom. So these sides aren't really very fair because I sanded them. They looked really good. It's just that you can see there's some knife marks on the bottom to get it off. The tabs didn't go all the way through to the bottom. So this is the speed that we were cutting today. And I might even slow it down a little bit more. There was no skipping on this, but you know, I like to give myself a little headroom. So these are the real things that we cut today in MDF. And that's the video of it rolling. Move these. All right, what was I saying? Okay, so the question I had was, so one of the things I'm excited about, I don't know if anybody else is this is, people have asked, you know, what's the difference between this and Xcarve, because Xcarve, they really like it. And I said, well, you know, the tool you have is always the best tool. So if you have an Xcarve, I'm not trying to get you to buy something else. It's a more lightweight machine. And so the extrusion isn't quite as robust as what I'm using here. And Shapeoko would probably compare favorably to this. But here's the big difference. First of all, they cap their sizes that they can make. And with a Printrbot size 4x8, you really don't compare that to anything unless you're on open builds or CNCrouterparts.com. Other people that use this big beefy extrusion style machines would compare favorably, but the ShopBot and the Xcarve, they cap it at, I think the rails are somewhere around 1,000 millimeters. So that's about 40 inches. So you would be able to go bigger. And they also have proprietary rails, and this is just off-the-shelf rails. So you could build your own to any size, any specification that you wanted. Now that even includes, if you wanted to give yourself more Z travel, you could. There will be a limit to that, a practical limit, unless you just redesign the whole carriage here, because I have to cut the plates for that. But that's one difference. Now the other difference is they only use belts. In fact, Shapeoko, I believe they use belts. I don't know about the Xcarve. I don't remember. But I think they use belts in the Z. And so this has nice linear rails and Acme rod in the Z, kind of proper. Now this is a hack up top here. I don't know if you can see this, but this was just a hack. We're actually moving this motor back so that we can get a little better control on the Z. But not only can this use belts like it's set up to use right now, and that may be fine for most people, but if you wanted to go up to a larger machine, you're probably one of those people that want to do it not just for fun, but for, you know, to make money. And if you're making money, time is money. So how do you make it go faster? Well, you may not trust the belts, because there is some stretch to belts over time. Now you can tighten them, of course. You can hear this is kind of like a bass string. It's real tight right now, but that will stretch a little bit over time. And the repeatability is good, but it's not like ball screws would be. So the next step up would be, oh, I just realized what that rattle was. The next step up would be rack and pinion. So there's a hole on the side here, and it's true of all of these. Wherever there's a rail, there's a hole for an add-on. And this will be a piece here that has a motor hanging out the side, and you could do NEMA 20, what is it? NEMA 30, what is it? 17 is our small ones. Is it NEMA 24s? I forget. But anyway, you can go up to NEMA 34s, which are really big motors. And so you could add bigger motors, and you can add rack right on the side, and that will be spring-loaded so that you can run it off of rack. Rack doesn't stretch. It's like gears, so it'll run off of that. Now, when you're running bigger motors, you will of course, need to run electronics that gets step and direction out, which this board does not, and you would need to run individual drivers. But those drivers come in these boxes from China, and they're like 30, 40 bucks. So we'll sell packages to upgrade to the really, really beefy independent drivers for each motor, NEMA 34. So it gets to where you can do production work with it, because you can go a lot faster. Right now with these motors, we do about a 4mm step over is what it's called. So when you go into your work, it would take 4mm. It'll plunge 4mm, and then it'll cut 4mm off the top, and then it plunges down again and does another 4mm. So that's what step over is. You take 4, 5 passes to get through the wood here. So with a larger motor, with independent drivers, rack and pinion, you'd be able to go deeper. Now, you also have to think about upgrading your, the more that you're cutting, the more horsepower you need. You might need a bigger bit. So there's other router options, both from China and just more powerful routers. So every time you go bigger and want to go faster, it makes sense to give yourself more power, more headroom, so that you can cut at the proper feeds and speeds. It's all about feeds and speeds. If you don't mind waiting and you don't mind doing multiple passes to get through a piece of wood, it's fine. But this machine is upgradable, where the other ones I mentioned, you can't go up forever. You can't go up to bigger motors and stuff. They just don't make it easy to do that. And I don't want to sell, 4 different ones that everything's different. I wanted to sell one set of hardware that can all be upgraded if you really want to. Well, I talked about rack and pinion and belt, and they're on Delrin wheels right now. And somebody online said, well, why don't you allow linear rail as an option? And that was always the intent, but I thought, okay, I better look at the drawing and see. So I went into the drawing, and sure enough, I've created enough space that this system will be upgradable to ball screws and linear rail as well. Now that brings your price way up because, first of all, ball screws, they're just not cheap. I'll get them from China, but they'll be expensive when compared to belt. So instead of running on these Delrin wheels, you would take those off. You would add a piece that goes in between here that runs carriages. And on the top of these rails, one here, one there would be rails. On this one, there'd be a rail on the top and the bottom. So I've got 4 sides to deal with, and I've already taken up the front. So I got to use the top and bottom just like the wheels do. So the rails will work like that. Now the ball screw, we'll have to add an add-on to this to hold your motor and run the ball screw across. But I can put some holes to add the equipment here. And then on this, we'll have to change this panel so that you can mount ball screws here. So I'll do it first before I sell any of this. I got to prove that it works. And we'll see what kind of speeds and feeds we can get, what kind of precision we can get with linear rail and ball screw. But, so the sky's the limit. It's really up to you. I'm not trying to push you to get something you don't want. So just choose. And I can't wait, Dave, to make this product because it's so confusing. It's not really confusing. It would just be the upgrades are separate, and you buy the upgrades separate. Or you can buy the bare bones kit that doesn't make you get all the Delrin wheels and belts and stuff. So there'll be a bare bones, some pre-configured packages. We'll figure it out. But pretty excited now that we're actually cutting, and we can move on to projects. But I got to get this for sale first. So I don't know. I think I covered everything. Oh, there will be a box here. You need an e-stop when something goes wrong. You can just hit a button on the front of the machine. So much like you see with the other ones, you'll have an e-stop and electronics box here. We don't have our e-chain on the side yet. We're just running this off of our normal power supply. This is 12 volts, and it's going into this legacy. It's the legacy header for the G2, and we just plug them in like they're motors on a printer. So that'll be enclosed inside an enclosure. And what else? I got to get some of those drivers to see how those will add, but we'll have space behind here to add those, and we'll have an e-chain coming off of this that go to the box. So everything's nice and neat. I think that's pretty much it for the progress with the CNC. The only other thing that I wanted to mention, that if you have questions, you can sure ask. My head has been all around CNC this week. That's really all I'm thinking about. But I do have a couple of other things to mention. First off, I want to remind anybody that's near Midwest Rep Festival to make that part of your plans if you live in Ohio or somewhere around that area. I know a lot of people fly into Chicago. It's a couple hours from Chicago. And I'll be going to that in a month. And when on Twitter and Google, a lot of guys are asking, are you going, are you going? Okay, I finally decided I'm going to go. So I'll be there, and I'm just really there to enjoy the show, but I'll probably bring a few things. I want to bring the printer belts. And last year I showed up, and Nicholas Seward, if you know him, he's designed the Morgan and a bunch of other crazy printers. And he had a wild one last year. It was just a really big printer. And he was working on that. And he had some table space, and so I was able to hang out with Nicholas. Well, he posted something on Google Plus yesterday, and it was this long bot, and it was sort of like the printer belt, but it didn't use belt. It was long, and it looked like, from the picture, that it crawled on the table and would print on the table at that 35-degree angle. He's working on his own firmware, so he's doing his own kinematics and all that. But it made me think, hey, I need to try that with the printer belt. You know, we're still not releasing that yet because we're still playing with it. The idea that I had was, well, I want to do something rep-rap for not just the festival, but to get this out there for people that don't want to spend $1,500. That'll be our first entry, you know, fully metal printer. So I spent last night and today taking an old version of the printer belt and seeing if I can make it crawl on the table for cheap. Now, it does get a little ugly when you rip away all the metal, and it's kind of like the difference between like a Printrbot Plus, which is really slick and nice and in a case, and the Prusa, which, you know, some people like the way that looks, but it's kind of like no frame, so everything's just out there. Well, it's like that. So with a rep-rap, I might go ahead and do printable parts. I have to test a few things first, but right now I'm playing with this fun little design that hopefully will turn into a test for the firmware, or the Polar 3D Cloud software that runs the printer belt. It will run exactly the same. So instead of rolling the print forward with this conveyor belt for Z, so, you know, it just moves a little bit and it prints and moves a little bit and prints, moves a little bit and prints. It'll be the same firmware and it's same motion, same cloud, but it'll actually start on the table at this angle, and instead of rolling the bed forward, you will actually just move the printer back a little bit, and then you'll print on it there. I didn't want to show anything because it's really ugly in my drawing right now, but it should be fun. So look forward to the rep-rap within the next month, because I got to get it done before rep-rap festival. A little printer that you could print yourself or order a small little kit from us that lets you print things. I don't know. It's not infinity anymore because it's rolling on the ground. And I really am wondering if I need some sort of a guide to make sure that thing stays straight. So I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do for, maybe I'll do a rail like this or something, but it will be inexpensive. So for those that have been wondering what's up with the printer belt, the first thing you're going to see is a public release of a really simple, basic little unit that you can build yourself to check out how that prints. I can just see it here on the table. You know, you'd have to lay down some tape, and if you wanted to print something this long, you could print something that long. It'll just draw itself back and print it. I'm shooting for about 6 by 6. That's the X and Y. The Z would be whatever you want it to be. But even if you were doing one part at a time, you could just roll it back and do another part, do another part. So you could do a whole bunch of parts in one evening, put it on the floor if you wanted to, or maybe you have a desk that you use for it. So anyway, kind of excited about that, and I thank Nicholas Seward for the idea. I had that on my list for when I, to print on the ground, for when we did a really large, like Big E style printer belt style. I don't really want to do like a black belt, because it, is that what it was called, black belt? I think so. That was a guy that did a Kickstarter that has this belt type thing. That conveyor belt is very, very expensive, and I just thought, well, maybe we can save some money by printing on the ground. So I haven't even tried that yet. So I had that idea in my head, but Nicholas kind of, I got to beat him. So I'm going to try to get it done and out there before he does, but we'll see. So anyway, are there any questions? Okay. Nothing worth mentioning? Printrbot poster? You can go online and get the files. I don't know if you have a vinyl cutter, but I did I did a little sticker for my printer. I mean my laptop the other day, and I just got the logo right off I think it was off the website, or I just Googled it. But yeah, posters. What would we do, Dave? If you will pose for a poster, I will do a poster. Yeah. But I still want to make good on the T-shirts, too. I haven't forgotten that. I was thinking about that this morning, actually. It's funny because my favorite T-shirt right now is the old Simple T-shirt that Mick did. I just love that T-shirt, so I'll probably do some reprints of that, and I might do similar one with the Simple Pro. But I guess I could do play. I kind of like identifying with the printer that you own by wearing a t-shirt. We'll see. Any other comments or anything? Okay. Well, guys, thanks for joining. Next week, we should have a price for this guy and a date for availability. Thankfully, if I start with just the bare bones kits, and you got to buy your own motors and so on and so forth, the eager can get to buying right away because I'll make these in-house, these plates, and we have the boards if you want to do your own board. So I should be able to at least sell the bare bones kit fairly soon and release the plans at the same time. So I release plans on the same day we go on sale, and I may start with the bare bones and then work my way up because it takes time to get this extrusion in, and there are NEMA 23 motors that I need to order a bunch of. So I might have to put a lead time if I put kits up for sale once we figure out what the lead time would be for those motors and stuff. But they're pretty easy to find. So anyway, have a great weekend, guys. We'll see you next week. I'll show you, have some more info on this, and maybe I'll be able to show you this little bot that I was talking about that rolls on the table. So until next week, have a great weekend.